Hi, this is Jim Moyne with Moyne's Bass Fishes, and in this video I want to just talk about one of the biggest game-changing type decisions I made last year in 2022 in a tournament, and I mean actually during the competition. So this is what occurred on the Champions Tour on Lake Vermilion. And for those of you who don't know, the Champions Tour is a tournament. It's a one-day tournament where you fish for 4 hours, stop, and then you have a second afternoon session of 4 hours. So typically the first session goes like 7 to 11. You have 1 hour break, and then you go from noon to 4. It's also a catch, weigh, release format, meaning every fish you catch is immediately weighed in the boat at the site where you caught it, and then released right there where you caught it. So, and every fish you catch counts towards your daily total. And of course, the person with the highest total weight of all the fish that you catch is determine the winner. So, with that being said, let's talk about Lake Vermilion itself. It's what I call a Canadian Shield Lake, meaning it has tons of rock, generally clear water, especially compared to southern U.S. standards. So, and by clear, I'm saying like 3 foot to maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 feet. That's kind of what I recall. It's got a varied basins. It's got weed growth in one part of the lake and not so much in the other, because there's a lot of rusty crayfish, which I think eats a lot of this vegetation, because otherwise there should be more of it, but there isn't. A lot of these crayfish, holy cow, they're everywhere. And the bass, of course, dine on those things quite a bit. So what else? Okay, now let's talk about the day itself. The day itself was, this was like a July tournament, kind of towards, I don't know, maybe for some reason July 9th stands out in my head. It may have been a couple days either way of that date. But what that does is that puts the time into this tournament right on the what you call the post spawn, or the tail end of the spawn, because there were still bass bedding, but not that many. But there was a lot of fry guarding males running around. So that kind of gives you a backdrop. And now the weather, we were seeing fairly nice weather. It was a little cool in the morning, but it wasn't too windy. It was generally a pretty good fishing type of day. It was mostly sunny all day, as I recall, and just a nice day. So now my strategy for this tournament was to just fish shallow, because that's what I've always done on Lake Vermilion for the most part. Because we've had 2 other championship tour tournaments there in past years, but those fell in August. And I really did well in both of those tournaments, getting a second in one and a fourth in another, just fishing shallow mostly. I did have some help with some deep fishing in the one of those tournaments. But fishing just a lot of shallow water and using a little worm, just throwing a little worm around. So it's not too much different than a Ned worm kind of a bait is what I was throwing. So practicing for this tournament this past season during the end of the spawn, post-spawn period, to me it was just a no-brainer. Just go throw this worm around and see what happens. And threw that worm a bunch, and it was kind of very disappointing results. I caught a few fish here and there, just fishing shallow, and nothing that was going to threaten to win this tournament. There's no way. So, and I really thought it'd be a clobber fest, actually. Before I got there, I just thought I was just going to just absolutely clock them with this worm, just fishing shallow. And there's a lot of, when I say fishing shallow, there's a lot of docks in the lake. There's some boulder fields that are up shallow, and even some bulrushes and some weeds and that kind of stuff. So, but I just was not seeing the bites. I wasn't seeing the fish. They weren't around. I was kind of perplexed. I didn't know what the heck was going on, but I did realize that there were uh, males guarding their fry, because that's what smallmouths do, and largemouths. When the eggs hatch from the nest, the males guard the newly hatched eggs, which they call these fry now. And so a lot of times, if you know where the fry are, and you can cast at the fry and then get the guardian fish to bite. So anyhow, so I did see some of that, and the tip off with these smallies was a lot of these smallies were actually eating their own fry, because you'd see like right up there might be a boulder, a bigger boulder right along shore, and all of a sudden you'll see a fish swirl right there, which would have been a male smallmouth, and then you'd go look over there and there'd be a bunch of fry right there. And so even though the smallie was guarding his fry, he was also taking a lick at one of them every once in a while. So that was the scenario. That was the backdrop of this tournament. So my plan is I'll just hit the best areas I know with the worm and hope for the best. Hope, just thinking maybe something was a little off, and maybe in practice or in the tournament itself, things will go much better. Well, so anyways, the first morning session starts, and I'm throwing the worm, and it's a struggle. I mean, and you can keep track of your standings, and I'm kind of, I'm getting a fish here and there, but I'm starting to fall in the standings. It's a 50 boat tournament. I'm falling in the standings, falling, and every once in a while I catch one. So I'm not, on the back end of the field, but I'm in the middle of the field. And we got about, I don't know, 10 or 12 minutes left in that first morning session, and I'm sitting like in 25th place, somewhere right in there. And I fish through this area where I actually see a couple fish swirling on their fry, eating their fry. And I throw in there, nothing with this worm. And I've also mixed in the topwater, by the way, throughout the morning. Maybe it's thrown the topwater maybe 20% of the time, and this worm 80% of the time. So I have caught a few on that topwater, caught some on that worm, but there I am in 25th place. So I worked through this area, and and by an area, I say the shoreline stretch of maybe 30 yards, 25 yards. And I couldn't get any of these fish to bite. So I'm like, dang. I got barely 10 minutes left. It doesn't make much sense to run somewhere else. Something's going on here. I know there's a few fish here. Let's try to catch one. So I turned the boat around, and for the first time, and I'm talking about the whole practice, I never even threw this bait in practice because I know it's a good bait to throw. So I'm like, I didn't even throw it. It's the first time I pick it up. And what did I pick up? I picked up the marabou jig, which used to be a deadly secret that originated up in the Lake of the Woods area, those guys up there. And I was fortunate enough to get in on that kind of early. And everybody knows about it now. Everybody knows about it now. So that's why I'm talking about it. But anyways, and I got to give Joe Thron, my tournament partner up at Rainy Lake, and Jeff Gustafson from Kenora. That's where Joe and I learned it from. Joe learned it from Jeff. Joe showed it to me. Joe and I have caught many a fish on Rainy Lake in those tournaments that we have there. But anyway, so that's that. Credit to Jeff. Now, I've got 10 minutes left. Back to the story here. 10 minutes left to try to catch these fish that I had. So I pulled up the marabou jig, and I caught 3 fish just in that last 10 minutes, right through where I just fished with that worm. I caught one of them. One of them was a fish that was swirling up on some fry. I caught that one. Caught another one that was swirling on fry. And then there was a big boulder that, I mean, I threw that worm at that big boulder like 3 times, and that was sitting out in about 3 foot of water, maybe 3.5, and you couldn't see the bottom there, but you could see the boulder, and I caught one there. So immediately I climbed like 5 places in that last 10 minutes, just on that marabou jig. So now going into the break, I'm thinking, okay, I know what I have to do. I gotta start leaning on this marabou jig and lean on it hard and see what can happen. And sure enough, in the second half of the day, I was able to just slowly climb the ladder, and I caught almost all. I think I caught almost all of them on that marabou jig in the second half. I only finished 7th, but if it wasn't for getting into some dead water, I got into some dead water in the last 25 minutes of that afternoon session, and I got in that dead water, and I wasn't able to. I think I might have gotten as high as 4th and 5th at one point, but then when I hit that dead time in the last 25 minutes, of not catching any, I fell back down to 7th. But anyways, that is one of the best adjustments I made all season. And with that marabou jig, it's a great post-spawn bait. For whatever reason, they like it. It's just, I mean, even though that worm I was throwing is like a little subtle finesse type worm, the marabou jig, they're just all on that. And incidentally, the one thing I didn't mention, there was also a mayfly hatch that had occurred, and there were still some of those around. So maybe I don't know what they think that marabou jig is, but I'm kind of leaning towards perhaps they think it's some kind of bug or insect of some kind. Don't really know for sure, but I know it's very good. It's a tiny bait, but it'll catch the biggest smallie in the lake if you put it in front of them. It's catch the little ones, it'll catch the medium ones, and it'll catch the big ones. So that was such a learning, not really learning, because I knew. At the end of the day, I was kicking myself for not at least throwing it in practice a few times to get a little confidence in it. And then, of course, I was kicking myself for not throwing it sooner in that morning session, because had I been throwing it all day long, there's no doubt in my mind I would have challenged for the win there for sure. But the guy that did win, guess what? The guy that won was caught most of his on the marabou jig all day. So that was David Larson. So anyhow, that is that story. That is that adjustment. And it's those types of adjustments that can make or break your day. I was grateful I made that adjustment. Just wish I'd made it sooner, like a lot of the stories I have, adjustments. So anyways, I'm trying to think if there's any other point to be made on that story. There really isn't, but it was just one of those adjustments that changed, just kind of a hack job of a morning. Just making that adjustment, I put me onto the right pattern, and I cashed out with some money in that tournament. So anyhow, that's about all I got to say about that. But there'll be more. I've got a few more stories like that regarding last year. So we'll get these videos out of the way, and pretty soon we'll be starting to have some topics on this coming year, because it is 2023 now, and my first tournament starts later this month. So we'll get a few of these highlights from last year out of the way on these videos, and then we'll get started on some 2023 type topics. Over.